It was the sound that first unsettled the paddock, a guttural, violent roar from the Yamaha garage that didn't belong in the era of refined electronics, signaling that the Sultan of Stop had finally arrived to claim his throne. The 2026 MotoGP season arrived at the Circuito de Jerez not with a whisper, but with a declaration of war written in scorched rubber and late-breaking markers. For months, the European media had engaged in a subtle campaign of skepticism, questioning whether a rider born in the world of production bikes could ever truly master the uncompromising rigidity of a Grand Prix prototype. They called his style erratic, a relic of a different discipline that would surely crumble under the technical demands of the world's most sophisticated racing machines. But as the sun beat down on the asphalt of Andalusia, Toprak Razgatlıoğlu began to dismantle that narrative one corner at a time. The tension within the Yamaha camp was palpable. This wasn't just another race weekend, it was the culmination of a high-stakes gamble that had seen the Japanese manufacturer abandon decades of philosophy to build a bike that finally matched Toprak's aggression. Every time he exited the pits, a heavy silence fell over the rival garages. They weren't just watching a rider, they were witnessing a fundamental shift in the laws of momentum. The way he manipulated the front end of the YZR M1, forcing the machine to obey his will through sheer physical force, sent a ripple of turmoil through the technical departments of Ducati and KTM. This was no longer about adaptation. This was about a rider who had found a disputed advantage in the one area no one else dared to exploit, the absolute limit of stability. Yet, as the session progressed, a new question began to surface among the insiders. Was Toprak truly in control, or was he riding a wave of momentum that was destined to crash before the checkered flag? While every other rider on the grid was searching for the perfect racing line, Toprak was busy inventing a new one, braking so late into turn 6 that seasoned engineers were seen checking their telemetry for a sensor malfunction. The technical data emerging from the first half of the session was nothing short of staggering. In the high-speed approach to the dry sack corner, Toprak was consistently found to be initiating his braking sequence nearly 8 meters later than the reigning world champion. In the world of MotoGP, where races are won and lost in millimeters, 8 meters is an eternity. It is the difference between a podium and a severe high-speed incident. This wasn't merely a display of bravery. It was a masterclass in technical synergy. The 2026 Yamaha, featuring its radical V4 engine configuration, appeared to have finally solved the heavy setbacks of previous years, providing a level of front-end confidence that allowed Toprak to perform his signature rear-wheel lift without losing his trajectory. Inside the paddock, speculation emerged that Yamaha had integrated a secret damping system specifically tuned to Toprak's unique weight distribution. Rival team managers were seen gathered around monitors, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and genuine alarm. They watched as the Turkish rider dived into the apex with a level of intense confrontation against the bike's natural geometry, yet somehow emerged with more exit speed than those following the traditional smooth lines of the Jerez circuit. The psychological weight of this performance began to press down on the competition. It is one thing to be beaten by a faster bike. It is entirely another to be outmaneuvered by a rider who is simply playing by a different set of physical rules. But as the lap times continued to drop, the atmosphere in the Yamaha garage shifted from excitement to a guarded, nervous energy. They knew that pushing a prototype this close to the edge of chaos often leads to a revelation that no one is prepared for. Behind the closed doors of the Yamaha hospitality unit, the air was thick with more than just heat. Rumors were circulating that the bike Toprak was riding shared very little with the one being struggled with by the rest of the factory roster. The evolution of the YZR M1 has been the most explosive storyline of the 2026 season, but at Jerez, it reached a fever pitch. For years, Yamaha was the bastion of the inline-4 engine, smooth, predictable, and ultimately outgunned on the straights. The transition to the V4 was supposed to be a multi-year project fraught with technical disputes and developmental chaos. Yet, in Toprak's hands, the machine looked suspiciously refined. Paddock insiders claimed that the traction control maps being utilized were unlike anything previously seen in the sport, allowing for a controversial decision in how the power was delivered to the rear tire during high lean angles. This suspected disputed advantage became the primary topic of conversation during the mid-session media briefings. While Yamaha's management remained tight-lipped, the body language of the mechanics told a different story. There was a sense of uproar brewing among the independent teams, who felt the playing field was beginning to tilt too far in one direction. Toprak, however, seemed oblivious to the political rift forming around him. His focus remained entirely on the strain of the machine, communicating with his lead engineer in a shorthand that suggested a deep, almost instinctive understanding of the new chassis. The way he mastered the bike's naughty tendency to shake under acceleration was described by one veteran journalist as purely the result of individual skill and superior motorcycle control. But as the sun reached its zenith over the Andalusian track, the heat began to expose the first real setback of the day. A plume of white smoke from a rival's machine served as a grim reminder that in this game of high-speed chess, the most jaw-dropping performances are often the most fragile. It wasn't the lap time that broke his rival's spirits. It was the sight of Toprak entering the pits, removing his helmet and looking as though he hadn't even broken a sweat while the rest of the grid was gasping for air. In the high-pressure cauldron of MotoGP, mental dominance is often as valuable as horsepower. By the midpoint of free practice, Toprak had established a staggering gap not just on the timesheets but in the minds of his competitors. Several top-tier riders were observed attempting to tow behind the Yamaha, hopping to catch a slipstream or learn the secret to his mid-corner rotation. However, the attempt only served to highlight their own turmoil. One by one, they would overcook their entries or run wide, unable to match the intense confrontation Toprak forced upon the asphalt. This created a mental pressure that began to manifest in uncharacteristic mistakes across the field. There were heated arguments overheard in several garages as riders demanded their crews replicate the Yamaha's stability, a request that was technically impossible without a total redesign of their own platforms. The narrative of the 2026 season was shifting in real time. This wasn't just a shock victory in a practice session, it was a systematic dismantling of the status quo. The Paddock Whispers grew louder, suggesting that Toprak's rapid adaptation had effectively shortened the career trajectories of several veteran riders. The weight of expectation was now firmly on the shoulders of the established champions to respond, but as the session wound down, their efforts looked increasingly desperate. Toprak's consistency was the most unbelievable factor. His 10th lap was as precise as his first, despite the deterioration of the soft compound tires. He was sending a message that resonated through every motorhome in Jerez. The era of balanced competition was over. But as the flags prepared to wave, a controversial moment in the final sector threatened to turn his triumph into a difficult recovery. Just as the session reached its climax, a sudden telemetry spike in the Yamaha garage caused the lead engineer to stand up in a panic. Realizing that Toprak had just pushed the YZR M1 into a territory where no simulation had ever gone. The final 10 minutes of the session were a blur of jaw-dropping speed and intense tension. Toprak went back out on a fresh set of tires, not to defend his position, but to uncover the absolute ceiling of the 2026 bike's performance. The uproar in the grandstands was deafening as he lit up the first 3 sectors in red, indicating a time that would not only shatter the lap record but redefine the potential of the Jerez circuit. However, it was at this moment that the dangerous moment occurred. Entering the final Jorge Lorenzo corner, the bike's rear end stepped out in a violent rift of physics, nearly sending Toprak into a heavy setback. The crowd gasped, but with a display of exceptional control that will likely be studied for years, he used his knee and elbow to prop the machine back up, never once letting off the throttle. It was a staggering save that proved he wasn't just fast, he was dangerous in the best possible way. The lap was ruined, but the statement was made. He had found the edge, stared past it, and walked back with a smile. This explosive display of talent effectively ended the session for everyone else. There was no point in continuing. The rumors suggested that the gap he had created was so significant that some teams were considering a total change in strategy for the remainder of the weekend. As he rolled back into the pit lane, the Yamaha crew didn't celebrate with high fives. They stood in a silent, respectful line. They knew they were no longer just a team, they were the guardians of a phenomenon. The aftermath of this Friday session would be felt long after the trucks left Spain, as the entire MotoGP world scrambled to figure out how to stop the Sultan. As the sun set over the empty track, the silence at Jerez was heavier than usual, leaving the paddock to wonder if they had just witnessed the beginning of a new dynasty or a shocking fluke that would vanish by Sunday's race. The investigative report of the day's events leads to one undeniable conclusion. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu has successfully translated his soul into the Yamaha V4. But the turmoil of the 2026 season is far from over. While Friday belonged to the Turkish star, the contract negotiations and team politics that govern this sport are already moving to counter his rise. Paddock insiders claim that a formal protest regarding Yamaha's aero configuration is being drafted by at least 2 rival manufacturers, seeking to label their disputed advantage as a breach of the technical spirit of the regulations. This heated argument is expected to dominate the headlines leading into Saturday's qualifying. Furthermore, the mental pressure of maintaining this level of performance over a full race distance is a difficult setback that Toprak has yet to face in the MotoGP category. The social media wars between fans have already reached a chaotic level, with some hailing him as the new savior of the sport and others dismissing his speed as a result of controversial decisions by the organizers. Regardless of the speculation, the reality remains etched into the timing screens of the Circuito de Jerez. Toprak wasn't just the fastest rider on track, he was a serious contender who looked prepared, mature, and more dangerous than ever. The twist in this story is that the real battle hasn't even started. The Paddock Whispers suggest that Toprak has been holding back 0.2 of a second in the third sector, a reveal that, if true, would mean the uproar we saw today was only the opening act. The lights will go out on Sunday, but for the rest of the grid, the nightmare has already begun.